Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So today we're going to be talking about ethos, pathos, and logos in our mentor texts. So this is when the cyberbully is you. It's our second mentor text in the packet. And hopefully you have already annotated for techniques and goals and found the counter argument and rebuttal. And so today I am going to focus on showing you some examples of ethos, pathos, and logos in this particular text, okay? So first we're gonna start up here, okay? And so you're gonna have to look at what came before it, but in paragraph 7, they have this idea that on the internet we forget that people are dimensional, which basically means that things aren't black and white. There's usually more to the story, okay? And so then here in paragraph 8, it says the main obstacle is the lack of empathy. Psychologists say that empathy is learned two ways. The first is by seeing, hearing, or even smelling how your action has hurt someone else, something that is not available to those behind a screen and keyboard. The second is to experience something painful yourself. Okay, and so even though we don't see like numbers and statistics, this is an example of logo because it's facts from research from expert sources. So it's saying psychologists say, it's similar to if you would see according to a recent study. Okay, so they're backing up this idea of people being dimensional with a reference from a psychological perspective. Okay, so that's logos. Now let's skip down to paragraph 13 and actually into the next page. So this right here is talking about, again, you have to look at kind of what's happening before it. This is referencing Mrs. Sako's demise and this idea that rage is easy on the internet. Okay, jokes are complicated, context is hard, rage is easy. Again, talking about that idea, referencing back to the idea of being dimensional, that we don't know the full story. Okay, and so now here, look, we're switching from third person into first person. Author says, I know how he feels. In the early days of Twitter, I jumped into the fray a few times myself, but since then, having been on the receiving end of several internet mobs, I think twice before piling on. Now, let's think about what might be confusing right here, okay? When you first look at this, we might look at this and think what? That this is an example of pathos because I know how he feels. But actually, I would argue that this is more an example of ethos because the writer's using his own experiences to show why he's a credible speaker on this topic. He's not just writing about this idea that jokes are complicated, context is hard, rage is easy. He has experienced this himself, and so he's basically claiming that he is an expert source and therefore is credible to speak on this topic. Okay, and now finally, let's flip over to pathos. Okay, so on the back, paragraphs 15 and 16. Okay, so he says, I've come to the realization, and he's actually starting to conclude here too. I've come to the realization that most people do not join these online mobs with the intention of being mean. Whether it's an online army or one of millions, people often believe they're doing the right thing by joining the mob. So notice I've underlined the words mean and believe, okay? Because those are feeling type words, right? People aren't trying to be mean. Mean is a feeling and emotion. And people believe, anything that's like belief, faith. Those are kind of some big clues that there's pathos going on here. And basically, I wrote the note that pathos triggers an emotional response the audience can relate to, because this whole section is something that we can all relate to. We weren't trying to be mean, we just had the belief that we were doing something right. And so not only is this an example that kind of has those key words, those key emotional trigger words, but it's something that the audience can relate back to because this is something that a lot of people have experienced online. So please make sure and have marked your mentor text with the same things that I did. And now you're going to go into your own rough draft, and I want you to mark and see, first of all, did you employ ethos, pathos, and logos and mark it? And if not, and you may have to do this on a separate space, but try to incorporate ethos, pathos, and logos in a couple ways. Remember, we're trying lots of things, we're giving ourselves lots of options so that when we do finally write the final draft, we have all these good things to choose from. But please try writing an example of ethos, pathos, and logos, and plan where you could insert it. And also, most importantly, make sure and write, just like I did, the explanation of why this is an example of ethos, pathos, or logos. Okay, you are marking your own text just like we mark the mentor texts, so that you are analyzing your own writing just like we do expert authors. Happy writing.